So yesterday I kept hinting at the quiet wealth archetype that I encounter the most, the one that I see most often in female entrepreneurs. And so I wanted to dive into that today because if you're watching this, there's a really strong chance that this archetype is you. And so if you are someone in business, or not necessarily in business, because this is the thing about this archetype that I've noticed, they're embodying this archetype. This is their strength in their life, usually in, I would say, their personal life, or if it is in business or in work, they're using it as a strength for other people and not for themselves. And so this archetype I refer to as the Lux leader, which is really the luxury leader. The thought that came to me before I came on was the quiet luxury leader. This person embodies the divine feminine and the divine masculine in life, work, and in business. But what's happening so often is they don't necessarily see themselves, and let me know if this is you, they don't necessarily see themselves as a leader because it's their default strength, because it's something that they just are naturally able to do. A lot of people around them are pulling them towards what they want them to do. So for example, I see this a lot in personal lives, especially for female entrepreneurs, like I said, where you are being the leader for someone else and for what someone else wants. So for example, say someone wants you to, do a project with them, and they have a vision for something and they see that strength in you, that leadership strength. And so they're pulling you towards this project. And it might not be a project that you actually want to do or that you actually feel called to or drawn to, but because this person sees you as a leader, they're pulling you towards this. And so this is happening so often with female entrepreneurs, where they are using their leadership skills, their strengths, for other people and not for themselves. And so the way to really get around this is honestly to create boundaries. But in another way, it's also about turning off, being off when you feel like you're supposed to be off, and not always being on for everyone around you. And it's easier said than done, but I find that when you direct people to be able to take action on their own versus you taking the action for them, this is what's happening a lot. People are being drawn to you for your leadership, and then they're in a sense expecting you to take the action for them versus them just taking the action for themselves. And so as the leader, what's really important for you is to guide that person to just be able to do it on their own, to give them direction. Instead of saying, I'm going to do this project for you, just say, here's some tips, or here's some insights, or why don't you, maybe connect with this other person to help you get this done, instead of having it be something that you have to do for them. It's really about redirecting them kind of away from using your leadership energy into standing up as a leader on their own. And this happens a lot with leaders because leaders are really here to go first. They're innovators. They're in a sense meant to kind of rise above. It's like you're standing on this stage or on this platform and you have this mission, this movement, and other people are meant to look to you for guidance. But again, it can't be for guidance based on what it is that they want. It has to be based on what it is that you feel called to share and teach and lead on. And this is where leaders, especially female leaders, divine feminine leaders, this is where you get kind of pushed off your leadership in a sense, is because, or it's, becomes more of this challenge area in your life and in your work and in your business, even though it is a strength, is because you're using your leadership skills for other people instead of for yourself. And so, like I said, this is the most popular quiet wealth archetype that I see, is leaders, women that are meant to be leaders who are leading other people down their own path versus leading with their movement and with their mission. And so a really important thing for you to do, I kind of touched on this, but it's about being off, turning off. And this really leads back to everything I've been talking about with quiet business and with just the evolution of the quiet wealth archetypes. But it's really about not always being on. And, with this whole concept and everything I've been talking about with quiet business, it's about being on when you really feel like you want to be on, but not being performative, which I feel like is what's happening so much with the online space and with online business. It's almost like we feel this pressure to be performative. And as a leader, you need to know when to be on, when to not necessarily perform, but when to speak your truth, to be able to share your voice, share your mission, share your movement. You're really here to create a movement, and when to be off. Because you really, really need to be off, which means being disconnected, not being pulled in a bunch of different directions, not being there to guide and support other people. You need time to just not be able to do any of that. And again, that is a challenge area because as leaders, we definitely, and I say we, leadership, I would say, is one of my top 3 archetypes. It's not my main archetype, but I think it's definitely one that I've learned to strengthen. But like I said, it's not my main archetype. But I'm saying we, it's kind of like the royal we, because there are 5 quiet wealth archetypes and you can strengthen all of them. So it's something that I've worked on strengthening in myself. But like I said, you know, if you identify as the leader, if this is your main archetype, then it is really about taking that time where you are just not doing anything related to work, business, to your movement, when you really need that time, in a sense, to recharge, so that when you are on, you can put everything into this movement that you're meant to create. Because really, leaders, the Lux leader, the luxury leader, as I like to refer to this archetype, are really here to create movements. They're meant to go first. But again, it has to be first in what it is that you feel called towards, what your mission is. It can't be based on other people's missions and movements. And so this happens a lot with female entrepreneurs, especially if they're coming from a career background, or they're coming from corporate, or they're coming from, you know, having beautiful professional careers, and then they want to transition to entrepreneurship, or they've already transitioned to entrepreneurship. They have been pulled so much as being leaders, but it's been for other people's missions, other people's movements. And so it doesn't necessarily feel like you're a leader. And I'm telling you, with the women that I've talked to, where this is their main archetype, the majority of them were really shocked and surprised that this was their archetype, because they did not feel like they were being leaders. They didn't feel like this was their default strength, even though I could clearly see it, that it was their default strength, that this is, you know, what they're meant to do and what they're called towards. They didn't see it. And I touched on this yesterday. It really is, when it comes to your quiet wealth archetype, it is this hidden pattern underneath that almost you can't see. But then once you realize it, then you can step into it in a really bold and powerful and beautiful way. And so I would love to hear from you in the comments. You can also DM me if this resonates with you. If you've noticed that people tend to come to you for these really big decisions or these projects, or they want you to be the one to like take on these tasks, and you do it, but you never really feel like it's right for you, or maybe you feel a little bit off about it because you would love to be putting that energy into your own thing, you're most likely a leader. Like I said, the majority of female entrepreneurs that I work with, especially if you're called towards business and you're called towards creating wealth and abundance, and you feel like you have some sort of mission, you are most likely a leader. And this is a really huge shift and movement that I'm seeing just with female entrepreneurs in general, where there's a lot of women who are feeling very strongly called to leadership, but again, they don't necessarily think that they are, or they don't think that it's a strength, because they've been using this leadership strength for everyone else, you know, in their personal life, in their work, in their business, and not for themselves. So it's really about, like I said, turning off so you can, in a sense, like turn back on and have a green light for what it is that you're meant to do. And so I'm going to keep talking about the archetypes. I just really felt called to talk about the Lux leader today because it's the one that I see the most, and it's most likely yours if you're drawn to this video. If you're drawn to the quiet wealth archetypes, a lot of, I feel like, leadership women who are very called to leadership are really drawn to the archetypes just in general. And I tend to attract women who are leaders. And it's so interesting to me because I would really love to know, because like I said, I would say 80% of the women that I work with are leaders. This is their main archetype, but I wonder if it's 80% of the majority of female entrepreneurs out there. I'd love to do like more of a broader research to know if it's just the people that are drawn to my work, or if this is a trend that's just happening within the female space, because I definitely feel like there is this shift towards, feminine business. Not only in the online space, but just in business in general. I feel like it is shifting very feminine, even though this year we are in the year of divine masculine. 2026 is a 10 year. So it's all about divine masculine, but it's really about female entrepreneurs operating by using more of their masculine and their feminine in business, because I honestly believe that you really do need both. You need more of that flow, more of that inspiration, more of that ideas, but then you also need the practical, the actions, more of that, the energy and the momentum that you're going to be putting into your business. I even feel like, the fundamentals of like creating a movement and a mission feels a little bit more masculine than feminine. I think, you can definitely use both, but for me, it feels like more of this, you're using more of that masculine energy within your movement. But I see this so often, like I said, in female entrepreneurs. So let me know if this resonates with you, if this is you, if you feel like you've been, in a sense, using this strength for everyone else around you except for yourself, because it's really time to shift this back to yourself. So like I said, I'll continue to be talking about the archetypes moving forward. Comment down below, let me know your takeaways, and I will chat with you in my next video.